Hello, my name's Christi Scarrow. Welcome to Messy Leadership, where we talk about the hard stuff in managing people. Today, I am thrilled to be chatting with Preet Makkar. She describes herself as a people-focused HR leader at Haleon. So thank you so much, Preet, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. So let's jump right in. I would love to know from you what's an important lesson that you learned early in your career that really has shaped who you are today.
Oh, so there's so many lessons that we can share, but I would say the biggest one that I often tell many of my employees, I tell my kids, is do not try to be somebody you are not. Be your authentic self, and you'll be a better leader for it. And yeah, I mean, we all need to flex our styles and stretch a little bit outside of our comfort zone. But being our authentic selves, that means our values, the way we connect with people, the way we communicate should really be authentic to who we are.
So that's great. I think that's really important. And I think sometimes the reason leadership is messy is because we're not showing up that way or we feel like we have to act in a certain way. So I would love to delve into that area, sort of the messy bits of leadership that you find challenging and what strategies you've used.
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, leadership is messy because being a human being is messy. We are adults. I always tell my kids, I'm just pretending to know what I think I'm supposed to know at this age, still managing through like our childhood traumas, our insecurities, our triggers, what's going on at home and at work. And so the messy part is that, we have to be there for our organization and for our teams when often we can be in a meeting and our mind and our energy is not there. It is somewhere else. It is reliving an argument with your child or your spouse. It is being worried about a test result that hasn't come in. It's about being concerned about aging parents. It's about being worried about the political environment, right? It's about saying, hey, I'm hungry. I haven't had anything to eat. So, really making sure that we're present for our people can be really challenging as leaders because there's so much going on around us and inside of us.
So it's a definitely a challenge I think many of us face and being in the moment. What for you has helped you center yourself or help others sort of kind of get refocused when you feel that coming?
Well, I don't think we're ever going to be perfect, but this emotional regulation is something we don't talk enough about. And my kids will come home and they're fussing about algebra, and I'm like, I wish we learned how to do things like our taxes, and how to communicate better with our loved ones, and just the things that really help us be successful in life. And so, we've done sessions. And in fact, we did sessions with our employees just last week. We had an all company meeting and we spent the whole afternoon talking about our triggers and, when we go into our box. And so, remember when we go into our negative place, all those negative feelings associated with it are, anger and resentment and fear. I'm bored. I feel powerless. That self talk around, why bother, or I can't do this. And, there's some really cool stats that, for leaders who spend more than half of their time in that box, will lose 4 times more employees than those who spend less time in their box. So there's a financial impact, there's an engagement impact. We know people lead managers, not companies, right? So, how do we get to a place where each one of us are more familiar with, hey, I think I'm going into that box, something has triggered me? Because when we get out of that box, that's when we go into from a scarcity to like an abundance mindset. So think about, hey, you know what, we got this and this is exciting, and all we see is possibility, and we see the option to be creative, and our confidence comes back. And I always, I often ask people, like, what was a really good day, what did that look like? And when they start to describe it, you can see their eyes are lighting up, and you can tell they were fully tapped in and plugged into what was going on, and they were able to put some of those triggers and some of those insecurities aside. So it's really about, we talked about naming it to tame it, and there was some science behind it, and I'm definitely not a scientist by any means, but that amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, and how something small, like something your mother-in-law says or something that your colleague says about something, that you immediately go into, hold on a second, they're attacking me, they're saying something about me. And often that's not the case, but we immediately go back into a very dark place. And when we're in that dark place, all we're focusing on is just what just happened, or what does this mean in the future? And we're not really present. in today and right now. And so it's really hard to get out of it. So we don't have any magic solutions. We did a lot of breakout sessions, and we did, small group work to understand, well, what are the triggers? What does it feel like? How does my body react? What do I start to say to myself? And everyone's going to go into a box, Christy. It's human nature. How long do we stay in it is probably where we have some control in terms of, hey, what are some tools and resources I can use? Who can I speak with? How do I speak with myself in a positive way so I can get back into that positive place where we're not hijacked by our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts? We're really informed by them.
That is so amazing. And it speaks to the people focused mentality that you have and that obviously you're trying to impart. What I'm curious about, because there's probably organizations that could not quickly jump into this space of let's have a day talking about our triggers. And so how do you get to a place where you create that level of trust and willingness for people to participate in that?
We've been very fortunate globally. We've rolled out at Haleon our strategic pillars. We've talked about the behaviors that are going to help us get there. And two pieces that are really energizing for me is we're talking about, growing myself and others. And there was a really great quote I found on Instagram. I love, we're all Instagram surfers. And I think it was from Lumina Learning. And they said that there's no self-awareness there's no self-development without self-awareness. And so we can read as many books as we'd like, but we will never learn a thing if we're unable to read ourselves. And how do you read yourself, right? It takes reflection, it takes time, it takes quiet space. And we don't have quiet space at work and at home. So you need to make that, and we need to invest in that for leadership. And when we rolled some of this out at the senior leadership level last year in June, we thought, if we found it valuable, every single one of our employees are going to find it valuable. Because guess what, Christy? It wasn't just something that helped me at work. It's something that helps me at home. It's something that helps me in every relationship that I have. And I think since the pandemic, we've realized that it's not like 9 to 5 is work and anything outside of that, I don't think about work anymore. The work and home life and the versions of ourselves that are work and home are so integrated that it's important that we invest that time in ourselves to be the best version of ourselves at home and at work.
I think you've inspired kind of a different question to me because a few times now you've talked about how you show up at work and as a leader, is very similar to how you parent. And I've just or how you show up in as a parenting and relationship. I'm just curious what you see as some of the parallels there.
Well, probably it's so hard. I have three teenage daughters. I have 21, 19, and 17. And yesterday, I did not show up well. We had a conversation. I was talking about, stepping up for housework and loading the dishwasher and the garbage and laundry and all the things that all of us as parents can associate with. And I was in a really negative place. I've been worried about my parents. They're not well. Work has been a bit stressful. And my oldest is like, hey, you're not being kind. And I think you're just kind of spewing your negativity on us. And this isn't landing well. And I just had this huge moment of like, yeah, she's right. And so, whether we are trying to parent and whether we are trying to lead, the way we communicate and how we try to send our message, it'll impact the ability for somebody to receive that message in the way it was intended. And so it was almost like I needed to start all over again. Now, did I admit that I was having a bad day? No, probably should have. But this morning, we kind of dusted ourselves off, and we're going to have a take two over the weekend to think about how we manage all of the things and the tasks that we have to do at home. So I would say the parallels are it's hard. Now, we're adults trying to lead other adults, right? I'm certainly not implying that our employees are our children. What I'm trying to imply is that it's humans trying to talk to humans and trying to connect and flex in a way that will resonate for the other person. And as leaders, you may have 5 people, 10 people reporting into you, and each one has their own way of connecting. So being a leader can be quite challenging. And it's important to have that energy and enough energy to create a trusting environment to say, hey, I might get the message wrong, but hang on for a bit because the intent is positive.
Yeah. Well, what I took from that, besides the fact that both parenting and especially teenagers, and I have three of my own, is difficult, is that idea of it's still around that foundation of trust. The fact that even if you didn't admit it in the moment, you reflected on it, you thought about it, and the fact that your daughter could be as outright to say, "I think this is where you are." I think that is kind of the environment we want to create with our teams, right? It's the ability to challenge each other and say, maybe you're not in a great place. And I think reflect on it and learn from it. So I like that the parallels that you've suggested there.
It's not easy to hear feedback like that. I don't know about you, Christy, but I still haven't told my parents things when I was upset. You didn't really talk back to them. It was a different generation. I don't think I ever heard my dad say sorry to me in my entire life. I think I'd probably fall off my chair. So I'm trying to shift and change my parenting. And as leaders, we often had leaders in our career that did not show vulnerability and didn't necessarily talk about what was happening in their home life or say things like, I don't know what to do next, or I'm struggling too. And, vulnerability was often seen as a weakness, but the impact that it has, because vulnerability truly is a strength, is you create that emotional trust with your employees. They are more likely to be on board and to help us through the challenging times that we have as organizations.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly that ability to be vulnerable didn't doesn't come easy for me. Still something I probably struggle with, and kind of as you alluded to, I'm sure I've learned more from the bad managers that I worked for
Mhm.
than those that were. I mean, I probably learned amazing things from both, but you remember like how do I not create that same level of feeling or with the people that work with me because you know how it felt. So I do think that's important to reflect on.
Absolutely.
So the last question I'll ask you, and we'll dig a bit into this, is what advice do you have then for people who are still struggling to manage people, to influence others?
Yeah, there's so many things here. I would say the one that really has resonated for me recently is, so we're trying to get out of the box, right? We're trying to make sure that we are not the ones that are putting somebody into a box. And often as leaders that want to empathize and care for their employees, and Canadians that are generally very friendly and very polite, is we often avoid the tough conversations. And we've done a lot of work at Haleon around the importance of candid conversations and how that is actually clarity is kindness. And there was a really great quote that I saw, something like avoiding difficult conversations is trading in short term discomfort for long term dysfunction. And that really resonated for me because just think about the relationships we have in our life, often our loved ones, where there is a dysfunction there because the tough conversations didn't happen. People got quiet. Somebody would say something at a dinner table. People just stopped going to the dinner. They stopped going to these events because they didn't lean in and have that messy conversation, which would have actually unlocked a different level of their trust with each other. So, for me, the biggest thing that I would say is, for people that are struggling to manage and influence, lean into those difficult conversations because, oh my God, the return on investment is absolutely amazing. That's one thing for sure that I would highlight.
Well, I think you've touched on it before, you started to touch on it now even, is how do you find that balance of being supportive of psychological safety? And I think that's a reason we often it feels like we're trending towards staying away from difficult conversations, whereas in the past might have hit you in the face with it. Now we're
Yeah.
being a lot more a lot more delicate about it, and it feels like it's leading us towards avoiding. So I think that is a challenge for a lot of leaders. What are the things that have worked for you when you're sort of feeling that, or you've seen others sort of struggle with?
Well, I'm gonna. I don't know if I'm allowed to say shit sandwich, but the good old templates that they give us, where like start off with something positive, then talk about the even better if, and then end with something positive. And sometimes it was two big fat pieces of bread and a little tiny piece of meat in the middle, and somebody would walk away going, I don't even know what they just said to me. So I always tell people prepare for those conversations because that's a responsibility you have as a leader, and be really clear and think, what would I want to know? Wouldn't I just want to rip the band aid off and hear with kindness what it is that I really need to do? Is there a derailer for me? Am I not showing up the way that I want to show up? Am I getting in my own way? So, my feedback is always, prepare for those conversations, have specific examples. None of this, people are saying this, or, there's a vibe or an energy. Like, be clear. Hey, in that meeting, when you said this, you interrupted five people. Here was the impact. Here's what happened. Did you notice the room shut down? Like be really clear and specific on, I'm giving you this feedback because I know you want to grow and I'm here to support you in your growth. And please plan those conversations when somebody is in the right frame of mind to hear them. again, I could go back to parenting, Christy. I'm sure you're just about to fall asleep, and then your kid's like, "Hey, mom, I forgot there's a project and I need to go to the dollar store." And it's like the worst timing ever. So we have to make sure that before we give feedback that might be a bit difficult to swallow for somebody on the receiving end, that we're like, "Hey, I had some feedback. Is this a good time? Let's book some time so we can talk about some feedback because I really want to help you develop." Creating that space and opening that place up for trust and being available for questions, following up after to say, "Hey, how was that conversation? I really want to make sure you have an opportunity to share back with me anything that didn't land well. Was there any questions of clarity you had?" That one conversation is not going to fix everything. Big issues don't get resolved in 15 to 20 minutes or half an hour, but they're the beginning of unlocking some true growth and development for our employees and for ourselves. So continue the conversation and continue that commitment is definitely something I would share.
Yeah, I have a lot of clients who are struggling with that or have this desire to create a culture of feedback. And I think you touched on some key points, which is how do you structure it in a way and plan for it so that you're not sort of caught off guard and you're just willy-nilly with what you're saying. But that follow-up piece, I think, is really important that not everybody thinks about. So yeah, I've had the conversation. I feel like I've done, I've said it, but wait a second, you're not doing what I said. And then you feel like, well, I guess it didn't work, as opposed to kind of having that, like, what support do you need, or the questions that you asked there. I'm going to have one more build on that before we shut
Sure.
down because I think this
Absolutely.
is such an important one. Is when you're receiving feedback, how do you have people, do you think, feel more comfortable asking for feedback or being comfortable when they hear it? Because I think that's another part of the struggle. It's we don't want to give it and we actually don't want to hear it, as you said. Anything that you've seen that could work or people could be thinking about.
And I would say it really depends. I've had some people that are so uncomfortable receiving positive feedback. Christy, I don't know about you, but it's like they're like, don't worry about that. Tell me something that I need to do better. So we also need to be open to our positive strengths and how we show up because it's really important for us to, embrace that, embrace the superpowers that we have and how we impact others around us. And again, it goes back to being in that place where we're open to feedback, whether it's positive or whether it's constructive. I struggle with it. I mean, my daughter said it, and you kind of want to say, "Go to your room because I told you so," or because I said so, instead of just thinking, "Okay, this is making me feel uncomfortable, but uncomfortable means growth. So I'm in an uncomfortable place. I just need to push through it and get to the other end of it." And again, it goes back to positivity. Sometimes we get hung up on a word. I got feedback once many years ago from a senior leader, and he used a word to describe me that really triggered me. And I thought about it for years. And I would hear that word being described in talent reviews, and I'd be like, "I don't think that's a fair word." And I'd be like, "Whoa." Clearly, I'm still hanging on to that. And I think it's because that word meant something different to me than what it meant to that individual who shared that word about me, right? Or classified it as me. And what was it telling me? And what was an unresolved thing that I needed to work through? A lot of people, as we know, they're like, "Oh, so listen, I want to develop and I want to take a course. So can you pay X amount of dollars? I want to take a 1 day course on X and Y." We know that development doesn't just happen in formal learning, right? The 70-20-10 principles, many of us know 70% is on the job, 20% is mentorship and coaching, and 10% absolutely is that formal training that you take. Um, but it's easy to say, "Well, I developed because I took a course." But unless you live it and breathe it and practice it, it just becomes another binder on the shelf that collects dust. I'm using binder as a terminology, so I'm dating myself. Now everything's online. But I would say anyone who has difficulty receiving it, just remember, why would you not accept something that's going to help you be a better version of yourself? Why would you not
Yeah.
want to be able to read yourself better? And sometimes when we're stuck or we're in the box, it's people that care about us that actually hold the mirror up to us. And so instead of shutting them out, we actually have to thank them for it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And it brings you back to what you said earlier about self-awareness being so essential. So, as you said, I think it's a great strategy. I know that's something I've tried to adopt, which is, why am I reacting to this? Why am I like I'm literally physically tensing up? It's not something I probably would have even thought about 10
Yeah.
years ago, but it's actually kind of reflecting. There's a reason this is upsetting me, and I don't 100% know what it is. Let me dig deeper. But if you don't pause and do that, then you are missing that opportunity, as you said, to hear what someone is trying to give you. So, any
Absolutely.
last thoughts, Preet, that you want to share before we close it down?
Just a huge thank you. It's nice to have a conversation about things that you often think about. Leadership is messy. That's why you call it messy leadership. I would say it's also a tremendous responsibility, and it's really important that we do justice to it, right? Because we impact people that work for us and with us every single day. We need to take it seriously. We need to look at ourselves. We need to better ourselves as leaders and as human beings so we can be that leader that people talk about fondly instead of, I will never do that again. So I would say if you're a leader, it's a great honor to be a leader and just lean into it.
Thank you. Well, as expected, this has been an amazing conversation, and I appreciate all the insights that you've shared. So, if you're listening out there and you want to look for ways to navigate messy leaderships, you can find some helpful resources in the show notes for this, and you can find me at christyscarrow.com. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Christy.